Welcome to the conversation. I'm Paul Grandal, the director of the New York State Writers Institute at the University of Albany. We're very excited about today's guest, and before we introduce him, I'd remind you that you can watch these recorded Zoom interviews archived on the New York State Writers Institute YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and our Writers Institute website, nyswritersinstitute.org. So our guest today, very excited. It's a very busy time for college presidents. David R. Harris, president of Union College. Welcome to the conversation.
Thanks, Paul. Great to be here.
So, quarantine, you have 3 daughters, your wife, your dog. How have you been dealing with just that aspect of life?
I think like everybody else. So it's 2 dogs, an older dog and a younger dog.
Dogs.
And like everybody else, I keep describing this as, it's as if somebody said run when you weren't expecting to run. And you could run a block, and you can run a few blocks. And now we're past the half marathon mark and we're headed for the marathon or the ultra. And so I think things were relatively easy early on, and you find some challenges, but then you work through them.
Right. And the college on Union College campuses, and many campuses have a residence right on campus, and you use that part of the time, but you also have a residence in the community. Talk about why that was important for your daughter and things.
Yeah. So every time I move, what I've said is I work at the college, but my family doesn't. And so I'm always interested in what the neighborhood is, what the communities are, and so forth, and how they fit with the family's needs, not just how the job fits with my needs. And so same is true when I thought of becoming college president, is to look at the house and so forth and ask, is this right for a 7-year-old? And my wife and I just said, when we were 7, we remember it was great. You'd come in from school, you get on your bike, go out with your friends, you run around, so your parents tell you to come in and so forth. And that's very difficult when you live on a college campus. And so I talked with the trustees and said, I'd like to do something a little different. And we will be thoroughly engaged. People probably won't even realize we don't live there full time. I think that's truly the case. People see us all the time. Right. But, where I sleep, who really cares about that? Right. And it's the best fit for both me as a job and the family more broadly.
That's great. So I know when you first came to Union College, you would ride your bike around Schenectady. Are you doing that? Are you getting a chance to do some leisure things during this pandemic? And
not as much as I'd like. My wife and I did discover, I discovered and then taken her on some rides as well. Let's see, we go over Rexford Bridge and then over there, I think Riverview is the road. It's beautiful riding over there on the other side of the Mohawk.
Right.
And got some great rides and then come back over, I think it's Route 9 or something. There's a bridge. Come over that bridge and come back along the Mohawk on the other side. It's just beautiful riding.
That's a lot of miles. Yeah.
We did 33, I think, a couple weeks ago on that route. It was really nice.
That's a great ride. So this is your first presidency. I know you've had positions at Tufts and you worked in the Obama administration. Maybe we'll talk about that. But
yeah,
you've been on the job, what, about 2 years or a little less?
2 years and 2 weeks or something like that. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're now thrown into this unprecedented, not just higher education, every single industry around the world. I mean, how are you coping with that? There's no good decisions. We mentioned, I'm reading the Chronicle of Higher Education.
Yeah.
A life or death decision. Reopening is an ethical challenge unlike any college leaders have ever faced before. And here you are, new president. How do you prioritize how you're going to structure your day and your planning and all that?
Yeah, I think that I feel fortunate. It's my 2nd year as a president. I finished 2 years as a president, but I spent 6 years as the provost at Tufts University.
Right.
Financial challenges. I was the provost with the 2013 Boston Marathon bombing.
Oh,
I actually ran that marathon that day. And for the bombing, for a week, city was shut down. We thought that they might be on our campus.
Right.
The surviving bomber.
Could you go back to your experience? So had you finished by the time or you were on the course? Or?
So what the quick version of it is that I had never run a marathon. I had done 5 or 600-mile bike rides. And so Tufts University has a marathon team. It's a fundraiser. And the person who's, believe it or not, still my friend, said, "Hey, Dave, you got to run with us." I said, "I don't run. I've run 5 miles in my life a handful of times." "You can do it. You can you can ride 100 miles. You can do it." And so I said no, but that evening he gave me his number. And sure enough, in December, I started training for the marathon in April. And I got a little stomach bug. And that's turned to be a good thing because it slowed me down a little. I was healed. I'd recovered, but I learned the difference between recovered and run a marathon recovered.
Yeah.
So I was a little bit under the weather, and I was somewhere around mile 25, 24, 25, somewhere in that range. And that's when the bomb went off.
Wow.
And my family, my wife and 3 girls, they were at the finish line walking towards the first bomb. They're about 100 feet away, and it blew up in front of them. And I didn't know that at the time.
Could you hear it? Could you hear it from that far away? Or?
Nope. I had, I had earbuds in. You're in a zone. I don't know if you've ever done anything. You're half out of your mind at that point.
I've only run a 10K. I've never done anything more than that.
You're half out of your mind. And I saw people running with these space blankets the wrong way on the course. Wow. And I just couldn't put it. And I just thought, oh, maybe they're running out to meet their friends. And then the course just stopped. And my wife had, my favorite part of the story is my wife had texted me, "We're at the finish line and we're fine." And I saw it on my arm, my phone, and I was glad I was too tired to respond, because my response would have been, "Who cares? Of course you're fine. I'm exhausted out here." And later I figured out what she meant. So anyway.
Wow. Well, to go through a trauma like that for the city and as Provost University, but still, there's nothing that compares to this, right? No. There's no game plan for this.
No. So my point is, I've been through a lot of Tufts, and then at Cornell, I was the interim provost in fall of 2008 during the financial crisis.
Oh.
So this is beyond those, but they were great trainings for this.
Right. So the first thing is, and this edition of the Chronicle is full of 50-50, both administrators, faculty, and staff saying, of course we have to open, and the other half saying it's a health risk, it's unsafe, but the underlying current is we may not have a business to go back to if we don't open. So how are you, where do you come down in that continuum?
So I started off and I said, really, I created a group called the Planning for Multiple Tomorrows group at Union College. I chaired it. We met 2 hours every day for a month. And when I kicked off that group, I said, we have 3 goals. Goal 1 is health and safety of the Union College campus community and surrounding communities. Goal 2 is achieving our strategic goals with respect to our academic mission, our core mission. And goal 3 is the short and long-term financial sustainability of Union College. And I said, these things are going to be in tension, and they are. And we have a plan that I'm very excited about to return, that actually, one of the things that's different about it from most schools, it allows people to opt out, and it gives them exciting things to do that are available only to those who do opt out.
Right.
And what I've said is, I've been at Cornell when we had a large number of students die one at a time, seen student death at Tufts. It's my student affairs person and me who are the ones making the calls, or HR if it's faculty and staff. And we can't put finances ahead of life.
Right.
But it's not so black and white.
Right.
And what I've said is, what's so hard about this is I've never had a decision where the gap between the consequences of the decision and the quality of the information is so large.
Right.
There's no decision you can make that you can get above probably 40, 50% at most, if you're lucky, confidence that it's the right decision.
Right. But now, quickly back to your position with the Obama administration, Health and Human Services, do you still have some people you can make a call? Supposedly they know a little more than filtering down to this level. Or
I've had an opportunity to talk to some health experts that are sort of kind of people you hear on NPR types. I've learned some from those, but it's so new. It's just hard to predict where it's going. And especially, as I was saying to someone earlier this week, the biology piece is easy compared to the human piece.
Right.
So you can get a sense of how much is it going to mutate, how does it spread, but will humans do what we need to do to minimize the spread? How do we get humans? Hard to do. Right. And so that's the tricky part about predicting.
But both you and some of your colleagues like Shirley Jackson at RPI and I think Skidmore and you went to furloughs and layoffs. Our
Hmm.
president, Avidan Rodriguez at UAlbany hasn't so far. It's different. We're state, agency and things. But how did you have to make that decision? That was a financial consideration essentially?
Yeah,
Or?
yeah. So Cornell was good training for this. So again, being at Cornell, we had basically a 17% structural deficit opened up overnight in 2008.
Right.
And trying to understand what do we do about it, and thinking about layoffs and furloughs. And what I bring to this also is that when I was, I don't know, I was probably late elementary school, I think it was. My dad, I'm a first-gen college student. My dad lost his job, and our family never financially recovered.
Right.
And so what I said back at Cornell is, I actually know firsthand what it feels like when you're in a family and something like this happens.
Right.
And so I would never do any things lightly. I would never go into this lightly. What it key at Union was, we're on trimesters, not semesters.
Yep.
So in March, when people left, we had an entire term that was about to happen, as opposed to semester schools, which the finish line was, in sight. The other key part of it for us was the CARES Act, because of the expanded unemployment insurance. And we looked at it, and the people who would be furloughed because they had jobs that you just couldn't do with no students, and you couldn't do remotely, facilities, dining, cleaning, some of these jobs and others, they were actually going to make as much, if not more, on unemployment as they were going to make if they stayed on the payroll at Union. And so at that level, it became relatively easy. I don't minimize the psychological impact of being furloughed, temporarily furloughed, but from a financial perspective, it just didn't make any sense to not take advantage of a program that was in place just for this, to take the union's deficit, which was going to be 7 million that term, and make it bigger, and the staff would make less than they would on unemployment.
Right.
And so at that point, it became, to me, almost a no-brainer with respect to union's context.
Right. So I read on your website, Union Where We Are, it's a lot of colleges are calling it a hybrid or high flex. You're offering that opportunity, and yet nationally there's a growing groundswell of class action suits saying, you're an elite college and selective, you're in the $75,000, I assume, like Skidmore and RPI.
Yep.
So to parents, is it $75,000 value if they're sitting at home on a computer screen?
So the key for us is that, unlike some other schools that have said, only sophomores can't come back, or juniors can't come back, or seniors and juniors can, or whatever it is, we've said everyone can come back if they want to. It's their choice. We've said, being very clear, that it's not going to be the environment you're used to. There's going to be a lot of conditions that you're not used to. But if you decide for a number of reasons you want to opt out, you want to be remote that term, then we're going to create some exciting programs that will allow you to continue to pursue your educational goals that are only available to people who opt out. And so my argument is, if they come back, they're still advancing towards their degree. And so it seems appropriate to charge what we charged before. Our costs have actually gone up, not down, but people are still advancing too. They're not going to get, they're not going to get a 60% union degree. They'll have a union degree. And then if they choose to be at home, well, they're making that choice, understanding what the cost structure looks like. They do save on room and board. And one of our donors stepped up and provided a gift. So everyone who does an experiential option remotely gets a $2,000 reward to help offset the expenses of doing so. So we're trying to address that.
So room and board, that's interesting if they're not having to pay that, because I know that's the business model that's really suffering at our state university and many others. Without that room and board, there's no business model. The structural deficit is beyond. So you figured out, let's say 50% opt out. You can financially handle that if they're not paying the room and board fee and everything? What
we've said is that, it's impossible to estimate how people are going to react this fall. I mean, are they going to take a leave? We're getting closer, so we're getting a better sense, but it's really hard to know. So our estimates are that we will have about a $14 million problem in the fall, over the course of the next year, if we continue with the Union Where You Are plan, this hybrid. Some are on campus, some are off campus for the whole year.
Right.
We've looked at a number of ways to deal with that budget hole, but we've also said that if we have to go online for the year, and that's possible. I mean, we had to do it March 12th, right? The conditions could change. Then it's a $50+ million problem. And that becomes a much bigger issue on a budget of 130 something.
So there's a dozen colleges and universities around here, and we're all in the same position to differing degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that's interesting, I see, you know, all colleges and universities look at each other and who's going to be the first to step out. So now you have RPI, no fall sports. You have the Ivy League, no fall sports. I know fall sports is a big part of the union community and culture. It is at our campus. Have you made a decision on fall sports?
So we've said that we're going to tell folks by the 15th. We're part of the Liberty League.
Right.
And Liberty League announced that the presidents voted, and there was a decision to continue playing just Liberty League competitors and 2 out-of-conference games. But that's not binding. RPI is part of the Liberty League and said we're not going to play.
Right.
So that determines the conditions if we choose to participate. We've been having a ton of conversations for quite a while since this planning for multiple tomorrows started, which was in April. Football. It's talking about that, and we'll have something to say very soon.
Okay. So I kind of want to pivot here, and we knew we were going to get around to race. So overlaid with all this, which is, again, life and death for college leaders, you as a Black man are now kind of on the forefront in a way of this discussion of race. And you've written a powerful piece in Inside Higher Education. You've done interviews. You've talked about it. But what I find interesting is all the local media and other media that covered you coming on, the headline was first African-American president in the history. I mean, 225 years, one of the oldest colleges in the country. And yet on your website and all your official things, you leave that off. So what does it mean to you to be the first Black president at Union College? Is that as significant as the media put it at the very top of the heap, or?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're wearing a white shirt right now. I can see it. Right. I mean,
I got to put my Albany. You got your union.
Yeah,
I know. I am.
And
white.
so I mean, I'm African-American, first African-American president. It's important. I'll talk more about why, but it's not the only story. And so I feel like people are going to figure this out pretty quickly, that I'm an African-American president. What's interesting is it matters to me, but it matters to others more than it matters to me, because I'm Black everywhere I go. Yeah. And it's not like I haven't spent most of my life in predominantly white environments. So in that sense, it's not new for me. I was the first Black provost at Tufts. I was the first Black person to sit in the provost chair at Cornell. I mean, this is life. It would immediately hit me when I was announced. I came out at Memorial Chapel on the stage, and it said who I was, and the people saw me. And I just saw it in the faces of people of color in the audience. And it was just pride and shock. And so I get that, and I don't forget that, just how much it means to people, just because, just say it means a lot. I was on a Zoom recently with about 40 or 50 Black presidents and provosts around the country.
That's great.
It was organized by a couple of presidents. Like, it'd be kind of interesting. We should just get together. Yeah. Never done it. And it was really interesting. We talked some about, being Black and how we handled these things, but a lot of it was just talking about what presidents and provosts talk about. But I remember when I did this a couple weeks ago, I looked and I thought, holy cow, this is amazing. Yeah. This is wild. I'm not used to seeing me. I'm not used to seeing a whole Zoom grid full of African-American presidents and provosts.
That's great. So, you've written about this, and you've talked about, the first Black kid on your Little League team and things. At every stage of your professional career, is it just exhausting, or do you get used to kind of playing that role? I mean, it must be just tiring to always be the first Black person or the first Black kid or whatever.
Yeah, well, or only in many cases, not necessarily first. But so There's this great article, Joe Fagan. I'm a sociologist who studies race, so
Right.
it's a little different. Not just a black guy in this role. It's actually what I spent my academic career thinking about, which I actually think is helpful for
Yeah.
this. So it's a guy named Joe Fagan who wrote this great piece in the 80s or so, maybe it was the 90s, and he was interviewing African American professionals in Atlanta who lived in they lived in a really nice subdivision that was overwhelmingly African Americans. And the question was, why do you live here? And the answer was, I remember one person said, because you only have so many ergs of energy. And I need part of my day where I do not have to think about being the only black person and think about what I say and what others say and be hit with questions, which are, well, people don't mean ill, but it just gets exhausting.
Right.
And so for me, the way I talk about it is I am struck by how often I'm in a room and I'm the only person who cannot see a black person.
Yeah.
I will realize, like, huh. And I said, this is no diversity here. And everyone else is looking at me and saying, oh, there's a black person here. This is great. Because I'm struck by that. But it's not like every day, every interaction, that's, for beginning,
Right.
top of mind. It's always there, but not necessarily the lead thing.
But I've also heard you say, and I just heard a wonderful interview with Cory Booker and Stephen Colbert. He said, I finish my day, I'm a United States Senator, I change out of my suit, I get into my shorts or sweats, and I have a short walk to DC, and I'm worried about the police and things. You've talked about even now driving.
Yeah.
I mean, driving around Schenectady or Capital Region, is that always in the back of your mind?
Yeah, it's always in my mind. And I think for a lot of us, it's in our minds because of things we see on TV or things that have happened to us. We've had personal experiences, many of us, that you don't forget. And you think, geez, if that could happen then, could happen again.
So you did tell the one story I saw in an interview. I guess you were around college, you had a rental car in California, driving while black. Did that describe that? And did that get physical or?
No, but I do think about it every time I see a police car behind me, every single time, or I pass one. So the quick version of it is, I dropped out of college. It's a whole nother interview.
Wow. We do have to have part 2, man.
Yeah. I started at Northwestern as a journalism major. 3 weeks in, I switched.
That's what I wanted to ask. I saw you were a journalism major. I want to know, why did you give that incredible career up? Such great, opportunity.
I know. I gave that up and I went to civil engineering after 3 weeks, which is an unusual transition. And then I dropped out of college after my sophomore year, towards the end of my sophomore year. Went to LA with a friend, worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car. And what you do is you pick up people from the shop on Friday, right? Who have rented a car, pick them up, bring them back. They get their car, they're dropped the car, and then off they go. And I was doing this on a Friday afternoon, Santa Monica Boulevard, very busy on a Friday afternoon. And all of a sudden, I hear a siren. I look in the rearview mirror, and oh, it's a police car. Oh, I think I was speeding and so forth. And I'd never been pulled over in my life. I was probably 19 years old, maybe 20. And I thought, I've seen TV. I know this works. Get out of the car. They tell you, hey, license and registration. They walk up, put the window down, that whole deal. And I did know, I want to be careful getting, the glove box and get things.
Yeah.
No one's coming. So I put the window down and I hear, get out of the car with your hands up. And I think, the heck is that?
Yeah.
So I did. And next thing I know, I see 2 police officers get out, one on either side, hands on their guns. They're walking to me in a very aggressive stance. And they're yelling, where are the guns? Where are the drugs? I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm wearing, like khakis and a, collared shirt, and up against the wall, frisked very hard, just yelling, and other cops are coming. And there are just people driving down Santa Monica Boulevard, rubbernecking slowly, thinking, oh, good, they got one. The city's now safer. And it was terrifying.
Yeah.
And afterwards, they didn't say sorry or anything. So we saw you driving around, figure you're probably casing or doing drops or whatever. I'm like, I work for Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Like, I'm dropping people with their cars. And well, go ahead, and I went back and then went home. And so that was 30 years ago, probably.
And you're right.
You don't forget.
If I was driving with my white face and a white shirt, they would have let me go. I mean, there's no debating that. I mean,
well, that's the problem. You don't know. And at some level, it was a little easier in the old days. If you had a whites only sign, you knew what was going on.
Right.
It's hard to know. Maybe a white guy in sort of the same circumstance that happens. I think it's highly unlikely, but it's hard to know.
So where you grew up in Philadelphia, right? Were you in you said your father lost a job. Were you in like a working class neighborhood or a
Yeah,
neighborhood that was
we
racially mixed?
right. So I was born in 1969, and what I tell people is, you're old enough like me to get this. I tell the students don't always
I'm
know.
59, so I got you,
Okay,
but I'm 10
they,
years older.
but the students don't necessarily know. But I say, we're the people who browned the suburbs. Like, you hear the browning of the suburbs, that
Right,
was us. When I was 8, we moved from Philly to an inner ring suburb called Ardmore, which is near Hereford College, Villanova, that area, on the edge of the main line, incredible affluence. And that's, there are very few African Americans, a very white area, but I felt very much at home the whole time.
right. So there's so much going on. I mean, I've been having a lot of these Zoom conversations with Black activists and people involved in this movement. I mean, the George Floyd killing, and these are people who've worked since the civil rights era, it just flipped a switch globally, and different people have different theories, but it was the 9 minutes and it was so
Mm-hmm.
graphic, and all the other white police officers did nothing. But how did that for you? I mean, I see now you have part of Black at Union College, Black at St. Rose, Black at students are
Mm-hmm.
now, it's unleashing this horrible pain and things that have been just underground for a long time. And it's coming out in kind of ugly ways, it seems like, but it seems like it had to happen. As a president, I know you're having those discussions about, right? I mean, students are
Yep.
taking to social media and talking about things 10 years ago or 20 years
Yep.
ago, calling it. How are you managing that and dealing with
Yeah.
that?
What was an interesting part of the conversation with other Black presidents and provosts, it's one of those, we've all been Black our whole lives. We're folks who, to varying degrees, thought about these issues our whole lives. Some of us, that's been our academic work, and as researchers,
Right,
scholars. And so um, there's nothing new here. I mean, the video is new,
right.
but even that's not new. Remember this guy named Rodney King,
Oh,
right?
I know.
I
It's
mean, and it was different,
right,
but in some ways it wasn't.
right,
And we saw those officers get up, right? And so it's not new in that sense. Um, what's the opportunity here is, since there's so much outrage from so many different parts of our society, it's an opportunity to try and push forward some things we were doing anyway. It's not
right,
as if, as a president, I wasn't working on these issues from the day I started.
right,
But I created an initiative on race, power, and privilege
right,
that would have been a lot more difficult to create with that name 3 months ago.
right,
But at this moment, people are more aware and saying, yeah, that is an issue.
right,
As I keep saying to folks, my big concern is, again, I'm old enough to have seen this, and also as an academic, I've seen this. People are very good about having a strong support for general ideas of equality. We're very bad as a society about supporting actual policies to bring about greater equality.
right,
And
right.
we also have a short attention span. And so
That's for
this is a
sure.
problem that requires, there's no quick fix here. There is nothing we can do, no statues we can tear down, no anything we can do in the next 3 months that's going to take care of what's happened for 400 years.
Right.
That's the challenge.
So when you first came, I mean, predating this intense racial, moment now was the political divide, the ideology that brought Trump in 2016 and the red
Hmm.
state, blue state. And so when you came, you brought from Tufts this bridging differences. And I like that idea. I was
Yeah.
going to talk to you when you started that, like, we actually have to listen to the Trump
Yep.
supporters and think, but did that go anywhere? Was there any
Yeah.
support
Yeah.
for that, or what?
Yep. We've continued to have events. I call them constructive engagement events.
Yeah,
I think some of it comes from just the value of being less affluent than my peers growing up, being Black in a white environment, parents who didn't go to college, is surrounded by people who have different life experiences. And I always saw the value not in trying to say, I want to have what they have, or they should feel bad and so forth, but just trying to listen, learn, and understand where they're coming from.
right,
Because once you do, then you can have conversations.
right,
But if you don't know where they're coming from and why they think what they think, you can't do that. Plus, you don't truly know what you think unless you've talked to others,
Right.
understand their paths. And so it's worked well. We've had a number of events, and we will have more. We had a great one on gun violence, which brought together, it was this moment that was amazing with students. One who said, a couple students said, yeah, we lived down the street from the shooter at Sandy Hook. They were strongly supporting, restricting gun rights. And there was another student there who said, I got my first gun for Christmas when I was 10. And at the end of the night, those three students were talking to each other.
Right.
And so that's what I think is a huge success and what's needed, instead of just meeting among one group to sort of vilify the others.
So the other thing is you've been very engaged in the city of Schenectady. I know you're on social media,
Yeah.
when the march in Schenectady luckily was nonviolent compared to in Albany and other areas, and the chief and the cops took a knee, and that went a long way. But I know the neighborhoods, Hamilton Hill. I covered it as a journalist for 40 years. It's got a lot of problems: poverty, drugs, violence. And your predecessors, I won't name names, but a few before you, kind of bought up a lot of properties because it was sort of a blighted neighborhood around the college. And actually, we had stories, I didn't do it, but the admissions and everyone would bring prospective parents in through the nice part of Schenectady around. So you just wallpapered over the problem. I mean, that wouldn't go today. Now, how are you dealing with, you're not far from an area where there's violence, there's shootings, there's gun violence.
I chuckled in part of that because GPS has now made it so you can't even do that if you want to. So you tell people how to go, but GPS tells them the fastest way.
Right.
And GPS takes you, I think it takes you down State Street, I think tends to, but it doesn't take you the way you used to route people. I'm aware of that. So the way I think about it is, we're only as strong as a school as our community is. And the community is going to be a lot stronger if the school is strong. We're in this together, right? I say to the mayor and I say to other folks often, the two options are, we can be a balloon for one another, or we can be a weight.
Right.
I'd rather have Schenectady be a balloon. I'd rather have Union be a balloon. And so that means trying to get our students, our faculty, and our staff out engaged in communities, trying to get them on committees. Been working with someone to sort of make sure we pull together a list of, school board, other openings. What are they? Not that there's a union slot, but just making it clear to people who want to get engaged. Hey, here's 10 opportunities, that you might. And so our students love Cocoa House is a huge opportunity where our students basically staff effectively an after-school program for kids over in Hamilton Hill area at a house. So we're trying to be engaged and have the community be stronger. And what I always think about is, it goes back to my research and also my Obama days. I worked in Detroit. I was the lead for the administration in Detroit on basically a pilot project. And I remember driving through Detroit in this neighborhood that was just like, it's just been decimated. It's like a war zone. And I just saw a little girl standing there, and she was about the same age as my youngest. And it's just, when the moments like that happen, it's not the first time that's happened, you just think, okay, that kid didn't do anything. You can't blame that kid, but that kid's life chances are affected by all of this.
Right.
And so it's really a question of, do we think it's her parents and her community's responsibility, or do we think it's all of our responsibility to give everyone the best shot they can have at, achieving their full potential? And so that's what we're trying to do as a college as well. We don't always do it the best way, but we're trying to be good neighbors.
I mean, remarkable institution, 1795, one of the oldest in America. And full disclosure, I used to play a lot of basketball on your campus. I was a freeloader. I had friends there with some faculty and other people I knew there. And my sister-in-law, Sheila O'Donnell, is a distinguished alumna of your college. She's an attorney in Paris. She's been her whole career there, but we went to she was inducted into your Hall of Fame. She was a 3-sport athlete at Union College. So. But anyway, President David R. Harris, we're going to have a second conversation here, and maybe I'll see you on a bike ride or something. I appreciate joining the conversation. I know you and all college presidents have some very difficult decisions, and I wish you and all of us the best of luck come late August or September when we start bringing students and faculty back.
Yeah, and I think actually, thanks, Paul. I'd just say actually to add to that, it's the whole year.
Yeah,
I said it's just going to be a white knuckle year. Because the
need the
goal is not to
vaccine.
start it, we got to end it. It's
Yeah.
going to be a white knuckle year.
I hope the vaccine, as Dr. Fauci says, looking possible in early 2021, you know?
All right, we got to hope, got to hope.
Yeah.
Paul, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. So long, David.
Thanks. All right,
Yep.
take care.